Before the sun rose, the land around Jerusalem lay in a grey stillness. The hills were dark shapes against a paling sky, their slopes terraced with stone that had known generations of feet. Olive trees stood motionless, their leaves dull with dust. The air was heavy, unmoving, as if the night itself hesitated to release its hold. No birds called, no animals stirred. Even the wind, which usually slid through the valleys at dawn, seemed absent. The ground bore the marks of many tents, pressed flat by weight and time. Ashes from countless fires lay cold and scattered. Weapons rested where they had been set down the evening before, their metal darkened, untouched. What should have been the restless murmur of a vast encampment was replaced by a silence so complete it felt deliberate. The people who lived within Jerusalem's walls had learned to listen carefully during the night. For weeks, the sounds beyond the walls had been constant. The low murmur of thousands of men, the clatter of armor, the stamping of animals, the calls of officers moving through the camp. Assyria's presence had reshaped the rhythm of their days. They rose and slept to the knowledge that an empire waited just beyond the stone. The city itself had drawn inward. Streets were quieter. Gates were watched more closely. Water was measured. Food was counted. Children were kept close. Every sound from the hills carried meaning. Those within the city understood who stood against them. The Assyrian army was not merely large. It was experienced, disciplined, and confident. It had moved across lands with efficiency, absorbing cities, dismantling defenses, and leaving behind administrative order where resistance once stood. Its soldiers were accustomed to siege and delay. They knew how to wait. They knew how to starve a city into surrender. Their commanders trusted numbers, supply lines, and reputation. They believed the outcome of this standoff had already been decided by precedent. The daily life of the Assyrian camp followed a predictable structure. Tents were arranged in ordered lines. Guards rotated through watches. Fires were lit at set times. Messengers moved between units. The army depended on routine as much as strength. Routine was stability. Routine was control. The soldiers slept with the confidence of men who expected to rise to another day of preparation. Another step toward an inevitable conclusion. Inside Jerusalem, the people lived under a different rhythm. Their days were shaped by restraint rather than expansion. They depended on walls built by earlier hands, on water channeled through stone, on stores laid aside with care. They relied on memory, stories of survival, of narrow escapes, of a God who had acted before. But memory was quiet and uncertain when set against the visible reality of siege engines and banners spread across the hills. There was a shared assumption beyond the walls and within them. The Assyrians believed resistance could not last. Jerusalem's defenders knew they could not match the army in strength or number. The city's confidence did not rest in soldiers or weapons, yet even that confidence was strained by time, by hunger, by the unbroken presence of the enemy. The idea that the Assyrian camp could simply cease to exist without battle, without warning, lay beyond imagination. Empires did not dissolve overnight. Armies did not vanish in silence. The night passed without disturbance. No alarms were raised, no sudden movements broke the darkness. The moon set. The sky lightened slowly, revealing the shapes of tents and standards in soft grey outline. From the city walls, watchmen looked out as they had every morning. At first, nothing appeared different. The camp was still there. The land remained occupied. But the expected signs of waking life did not follow. No smoke rose from the fires. No figures moved between the tents. The animals were silent. The banners hung limp, untouched by wind. As the light strengthened, the stillness became more unsettling. The watchmen leaned forward, straining to see. What they saw was absence expressed through presence. Everything was in place, yet nothing lived within it. Careful steps were taken. The gates were not thrown open. Messengers were sent along the walls. The news spread quietly, carried in low voices that barely trusted themselves. Something was wrong in the camp. The Assyrian army, which had filled the hills with noise and threat, lay unmoving. Those who ventured closer did so slowly, with hesitation. The ground between the city and the camp felt exposed, unreal. The air was thick, carrying the faint smell of extinguished fires and cold metal. As they approached, the truth revealed itself not in spectacle, but in repetition. Tent after tent, soldier after soldier, stillness without sign of struggle, weapons untouched, armor unbroken, bodies lying as they had fallen in sleep. There was no sound of battle to explain it, no marks of siege engines turned inward, no trace of human violence. The vastness of the camp only deepened the shock. The scale defied immediate understanding. It was not one unit, not a corner of the army, but the whole. The strength that had pressed against Jerusalem's walls had been undone without warning, without resistance. Human reactions were restrained, almost muted. There was fear in the presence of what could not be explained. Some covered their mouths. Others stood motionless, unable to move further. The confidence that had sustained the city did not turn into celebration. It turned into quiet disbelief. Plans for defense, for endurance, for surrender fell away, rendered meaningless by events no one had anticipated. The social order shifted in subtle ways. Leaders who had prepared speeches found no words. Soldiers who had expected to fight found no enemy. The collective strength of the empire dissolved into individual silence. Each man who stood among the tents was alone with what he saw. The assumptions that had governed both sides were exposed as fragile. News traveled outward from the camp, carried by those who dared to leave. The reputation of Assyria, built on visible dominance, was marked by this invisible collapse. The immediate consequence was retreat, not in panic, but in stunned withdrawal. The machinery of conquest halted. Routes were abandoned. The pressure that had shaped Jerusalem's days lifted, not gradually, but all at once. The land bore the marks of what had occurred. The tents were eventually removed. The bodies were dealt with according to necessity and custom. But the impression remained. The hills did not forget the weight of that presence or its sudden absence. The ground, once compressed by thousands of feet, slowly loosened under sun and rain. Grass returned, stones settled. In the years that followed, travelers would pass through the area without knowing precisely where they stood. The ruins were not monumental. There were no towering remnants to announce the event. Instead, there was a quietness to the place, a sense of interruption in the natural flow of history. Empires usually leave scars that shout. This one left a pause. The wind moves differently over open ground than over a camp. It carries fewer sounds. It meets less resistance. Where there had once been the ordered life of an army, there was only landscape again. Hills, paths, sky. The permanence of what happened was not written in stone, but in memory and absence. What had been undone could not be restored, and what had intervened did not announce itself again. The land remains, bearing witness in silence to a moment when human power reached its limit and was quietly, irrevocably halted.